G'day, welcome back. This is my next video in my series on World Chess Championship blunders. And now we've moved on to 1969, where Spassky earned a second match against Petrosian for the World Chess Championship, which he won. So let's just quickly go through the background to this match. Here we have the Wikipedia page. We have the normal process interzonals, people who are qualifying for the candidates. So let's have a look. Anyway, Larsen, Korchnoi, Geller, Gligoric, Portish, and Reshevsky. Last time we'll see him. Quite impressive that he's still there in 1968. And then you go on to the candidates. Oh, there's a playoff actually, which Reshevsky won for the last spot. And then you go into the candidates where Spassky and Tal was seeded straight in from last time. And then you can see the playoff profile there. Spassky just stomped past Geller and Larsen and then Korchnoi to qualify to play Petrosian. And as I say, this time around he won fairly comfortably. I mean, it was fairly close, but won by a couple of points in the end. And he would become the new chess world champion. Okay, let's close that. So having a look at the analysis screen here, top right chart, you can see there, fairly close, but then towards the end, Spassky pulled away. In fact, the last game was drawn when Spassky was in a winning position, so the margin's perhaps a little bit larger than that. And then now I'm just going to go through, I believe it's 4 of the games. So the first game we're going to look at is game number 1. We have a look at the position on the board there. This is just a bit of an end game / tactical study. According to the engine, let me turn the engine on so we can see the eval bar. Black's comfortably winning in this position. Now Spassky did win this game in the end, but he made it much more difficult than he should have. Just have a look at the lines you might consider playing in this position. If you have a bit of a quick look, they're the 2 lines. Petrosian played a d2, and he lost most of his advantage. We'll see how. He got it back later. But the more stronger winning line was rook to c3. So let's have a look at d2 first and see what happens in that case. Now the bishop can return. See, you drop the rook takes c6, and the dangerous advanced b pawn drops, right? And that's kind of, so in the end, Petrosian did win that game, but not because of that strategy, right? Now what should have been played is, show the variation there, rook c3. Let's have a look at, for instance, a typical line here. I mean, there's a few possibilities for white. Let's go with king f2 line, and then one of the better lines here for black is to play knight to b5. It's quite cute, right? So rook takes b4, push the pawn, have to stop the pawn in a couple of ways. Let's say use the king, create a queen anyway, check, and we're going to win a piece. So basically, the starting position there was black was basically should have been able to win a piece for his advanced dangerous pawn, and that did not happen. So that was kind of surrendered somewhat of his advantage. Okay, so let's quickly move on to the next game we're going to cover, which is game 4 here. Let me bring up the chart. Okay, you can see this time it's another blunder by Petrosian, and there was quite a sort of even game for most of the moves, and then around move 36, 37, you can see Petrosian and a number of steps gradually ended up with a losing position. So let's go back to where the position's reasonably even. There's a lot of threats here. I mean, white, Petrosian, is on the defensive. Black controls the open e-file, so there's you know some weak squares here, which maybe black should be concerned about. And just have a look at the position and have a look at what you would consider doing. First of all, do the move you should have played, which is just dropping the rook back to c3, and that covers a lot of those squares, and the game goes on. I mean, black still has sort of strong position, but moving the rook here covers all those weak squares on the 3rd rank. Okay, let's see what he did. Petrosian just ignored it. He played a5. So, and the winning continuation by black was to play bishop to d3. Now, the point with that is that if you take the bishop with the bishop, then it's not what he played. He played knight to f5. But if you take the bishop, then you get this sequence. Now this pawn is unprotected, so black can grab that with check. Come in there. Knight takes d3, and now there are weak squares all over the place in the black position. And what Petrosian did was knight f5, which doesn't really do a lot. Queen to g5, some nasty discovered checks being threatened there, and then another mistake by Petrosian. He dropped his knight back. Queen h4 check, king to g1, bishop takes f1, and white resigned there. Typical continuation, right? Let's take the the bishop back, then we're penetrating on the second rank. Another potential move at this stage was to actually protect across the second rank like that, but then we can just block anyway. So, you may have to give up your queen. Let's move on to the next game I want to have a look at. She's the ones who made comments on game number 14. So bring up the chart. So you have a look at the game score there. Once again, it's a blunder by Petrosian. He was winning the game and ended up being a draw. So let's go to the key position e4. Once again, it's an interesting end game. So Petrosian should win it. It became a draw. So let's have a look at what he played in the game. Have a look. Actually, this is a good position anyway. Bishop versus rook endgame. Pawns are even. The only advantage black has is his rather advanced b pawn, but also the f pawn can be quite dangerous. So this is what happened. Petrosian took the b pawn, which was a mistake because now the f pawn becomes too dangerous. Let's have a look at a continuation. Let's push the pawn. White can come behind. He can pick up the other pawn, but basically the f pawn is going to cost the rook, and then the game should be drawn after that. If nothing else, the bishop can sack itself for that pawn, and this king can just go and hide in the corner. So that was the wrong way of addressing it. And what, rather than playing, I say, that king takes b3, there's no need to take that pawn. That pawn can be picked up at a later date. Winning continuation is just keep the rook active, push the f pawn, check, push the black king into a poorer position. This is just one of many possible lines. Now we pick up that pawn, and then black has to hold the h pawn with his bishop. Check. Get the king across. Once white's king gets back, we pick up one of these pawns. I mean, obviously this is going to be a win for white. The sort of the continuation is quite funny actually, because now it's sort of like if black wants to sort of threaten, then we just go behind it, and then probably even can sneak around, do something like that. Anyway, so that was another sort of missed opportunity by Petrosian. And now let's have a look at the last game. We're going to look at the very last game. You can see in the chart there. It didn't really even show up as such a big blunder, but it was a fairly even game. And then once again, getting towards the home control and the end game, mistake by Petrosian again. So let's have a look at what the position looked like here. Once again, it's an end game style of position. Now, the move played is rook b7, which loses. Rook b8 is drawing. So let's have a look at what the difference is. Rook b8, let's just go through the rook b8 line, and then black can get behind his a pawn, pushes a pawn, and that provides enough counterplay. I don't want to go into too much detail, just another one of these sort of tricky endgame blunders. But rook b7 and then rook a7, same thing. What's the difference? Rook d6. Problem is that the rook can't be held there. You've wasted one tempo, and then I think one tempo is all that is needed to cause problems. And now the pawn drops, and obviously this pawn will drop, and white will win. So that's quite a minor sort of blunder over a couple of moves. So as you'll notice, I've just quickly gone over 4 games here. Once again, these are just 2- and 3-star blunder levels. Nothing spectacular. Nothing horrible, right? I mean, obviously these players this standard, maybe you'd expect to do a little bit better, but that's sort of just a progression. Mainly Petrosian in terms of making these sort of half errors which lost him games or turned a win into a draw and so on. And we won't see Petrosian again. I think 1972, we know where we are headed now and which blunder we might look at. So just a quick one today. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed that.